Hello, it is Monday the 27th of March. Can't believe it's the 27th already. Wow. Um, I wanted to just do a quick video talking a little bit about some of the news stuff that has happened in the last couple months and kind of my whole thought process on how the American elections have gone and frankly some of the, I won't call it stupid, but I'm going to definitely call it lack of critical analysis on anyone's part, particularly the left. And so I want to kind of introduce some things that many people may not be aware of, even in political conversations about this, about influences, right? So with that being said, if this were monetized, it would be demonetized, I'm confident. That's why I don't do monetization. Um, so obviously, March 2017, Donald Trump was elected to being president of the United States, and his opponent was Hillary Clinton. Now, what I found interesting was both Trump and Bernie were populists. And so a lot of people I know who don't like Trump have said hashtag not my populist. But what's funny about populists is they not only tend to appeal to a common denominator, they tend to appeal to every man, basically, quote unquote. Bernie to a younger generation more than Trump did. Trump appealed to the populists often who are more blue collar, who are, the Rust Belt, for instance, which is heavily unionized typically, voted for Trump over the Democrat, which is very rare because the unions often always say vote Democrat. Even though, for instance, in Illinois, if you're a teacher and you're in the teachers union and you vote Democrat, you're just an idiot. The teachers union has consistently not only not been able to defend the pensions from being raided, they have also not been able to frankly argue for higher wages. And all the teachers usually get is higher regulations. One teacher in the area who is tenured and has been there for a while makes $80,000 in the city I live in. Most new teachers get less than 30,000, or roughly around 30. They'll be lucky if they ever see 40. And this is from new teachers who now have more teaching regulations and have to teach Common Core, which I'm sorry, having substitute taught several times in science and math, when the students were dividing polynomials, and I was showing them the FOIL method of multiplying them to kind of undoing, dividing polynomials. This is how you undo that. Here's where it comes from, and I taught them the FOIL method, first, outer, inner, last, for these polynomials. They looked at me like I was giving them the gospel, like they'd never heard of this before. And I asked them, "Do you have a textbook?" And they said, "No." I'm like, okay. So again, this understanding that Democrats are the party of education, the Democrats are the party of workers' rights, is frankly no longer true if it ever was. Okay, and so that comes out a little bit in how the populist election went. Now Sanders, the Democrats went after pretty heavily. They made use of superdelegates. The Democrats have superdelegates that. Okay. Um, the Republicans who believe in representation didn't even have superdelegates, which would make a little more sense in that regard. But so Sanders was out, and then of course there were leaks indicating that, um, you know, that the Democrats had conspired against him, which was true. That Hillary had been assisted by various media outlet people, getting questions and whatnot for debates against Donald Trump, or even in general in her debates against Sanders. And everyone of course worries about Russian collusion. It's like, hey, we got caught. Let's blame who caught us. Um, it used to be called investigative journalism back in the day. I know that the mainstream media doesn't really do that much anymore. I think ABC occasionally does it. But really, it's other people who the alternative media pick up. Because the mainstream media just has no, frankly, testicles. They don't have nuts to basically go after the people in power anymore because they are people in power. So as you start watching the reactions to fake news after the election and you start responding to, was it Russia, who colluded, this and that, and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, most people are going to vote for Trump over Hillary anyway. She has proved herself untrustworthy. She had been in the office already, or the First Lady office. Obamacare ultimately was from her. It was a failed attempt in the 90s at her health care reform, and he simply modified and edited it. Many people who are students and young adults were also stupid because they've never read Obamacare. They don't realize that it took away subsidized student loans from the party and Obama who had said they want to help students with student debt. Okay. I'll help you with student debt by giving you more. You can get interest while you're still in college now. Thanks, Prez. Appreciate it. There's my hope and my change right there, just gone. Um, so after 8 years of that nonsense, you know, And again, I sold insurance during Obamacare and before. I know how insurance works. Most politicians don't. They're absolutely stupid on the subject. They also, the Democrats at least, don't seem to understand incentives. So whenever they make a progress or a policy of some form, they only think of it from a positive term. They don't realize negative implications of that incentive. So again, they need to learn some economics and psychology. So anyway, the news stories. The reason I bring up the mainstream media is the mainstream media used to be trusted, right? Walter Cronkite used to be one of the most trusted names in news, right? Even though he believed in globalism. But now, many people on the left who argue against alternative media do so at the expense of their own philosophy, right? Many people on the left distrust and hate corporations. Now, of course, corporations nowadays in some ways are a problem. It's often an issue of crony capitalism, which both socialists and capitalists don't like. And that's actually why people on the right and people on the left who like Sanders had common disagreements, and they could actually get along, at least in terms of their criticism, not necessarily the solution. I think that's been misunderstood and missed a lot of times. But what's interesting is the immediate now trust of media that is corporate. You know, it's like, okay, so you hate corporations, but you say the only trustworthy news we get is from corporations that have also been colluding with our government. And your problem with Russia today is that it's government owned. Why again? Okay, so the government doesn't own the media, but it sure as hell has some form of collusion with them, especially at least one party. That leads me immediately to distrust the mainstream media. They've gotten stories wrong before. They've been caught by alternative media, and these little things called cell phones. I don't know if mainstream media knows what this is. I'm gonna pull it out. This is a smartphone, dumbasses. This can actually catch video and audio that you edit. So when it comes down to something like, say, the sister, I can't remember who it was, Michael Brown or not. It was the sister of one of the people who had been shot, and I think it was ABC or something was caught. I don't even think they apologized for it. It was, she was talking to the writers, don't burn stuff here down, don't do that down, we want peace here. And they cut it, and immediately after they cut it, she said, go to the white neighborhoods, go to the suburbs, take that there. And they're saying she's arguing for peace? No, that's a lie. That's not even a thing of we misunderstood or misinterpreted. That was a bold-faced editorial lie. And the lies are not often done through misunderstanding. It's misunderstanding of something that has been edited. And what they don't understand is we have the means of seeing this now. So they have to use the fake news outlet, basically, to keep their power and their money because they're corporations. Okay, this is basically a form of crony capitalism arguing for globalism, because what most people who also think that we should have no borders, etc., really are buying into is the story that will be a better world for that. No, we're not. And part of the problem is, if you think it's bad with a big nation like the United States or India, where there is a huge divide between rich and poor, you ain't seen nothing yet. Okay? In order to keep that global power, there needs to be totalitarian dominance. There has to be. Okay? There cannot be differences of opinion. If I differ with my government, I can leave. If I disagree with the world government, where am I going to go? The moon? Right? It's going to be totalitarian, and it's going to have this understanding of economy of uber rich, uber poor, and very little, if anything, in between. And that also, by the way, leads to unstable governments. Whenever there is not the ability to move around, you get a lot more unstable governments. So, am I saying the United States is the perfect government? No. Am I saying capitalism is the best form of, the economy? I'm saying it's the best that I know of. What I'm trying to say basically is this. The new left is sold its soul, and it sold its soul to globalists like, you think George Soros really cares about you? No, he cares about making money. And if you get in his way, he will crush you. Okay? He has toppled governments due to their economy. He has the power to do that. And if you think that, again, the right is the party of the rich, and you get money from George Soros, you need to have your head examined. The man, frankly, is a corrupt monster. And what he supports is for his benefit, not yours. So he supports, for example, Black Lives Matter. Now, the issue of Black Lives Matter is not that you can say all lives matter, hashtag, you've got this thing done. Many people from the 80s and the Reagan era recognize the religious right, and they see the religious right as a person or an entity going against your liberties, and there's some truth to that. What the problem is, though, is that many people, even in the class I teach, see religious people as only the right wing, and as the religious right in government. Guys, it's changed. It's changed a lot. Now it's the religious left in government. The religious left, which doesn't talk about religion but still ultimately uses Marxism in religion to push an agenda that sounds good, but at the end of the day, as with Marxism, which is not a positive system, it's a negative one, it leads to suffering, death, and basically lack of progress, right? So the religious left are groups of people that tend to use religion for politics. Examples are liberation theology. Now, if you wonder, what do I mean by this? How can do I have evidence of this? Yes. If you go to Black Lives Matter's website, if you actually check the source material for Black Lives Matter, you'll find that one of the three ladies who started it is a liberation theologian. Not just Marxism, a liberation theologian. So the example behind this is, yes, there is a religious left. Okay, the religious left supports basically very left-wing policies now. I had not only attended the Concordia Seminary in Fort Wayne, which is mostly right-wing people, but then I attended Luther Seminary, which is all ELCA, or at least majority ELCA. They do have, I was an ecumenical student, but they're left-wing. They are hardcore left-wing. They were arguing for progressive politics before many progressive politicians were arguing for it. So this idea of the religious right is the only problem is horseshit. Okay? The religious left is the new thing to watch out for in a lot of these grassroots organizations, and globalism funding that for their own ends is the next thing to look out for. And if you trust only the mainstream media, you don't believe that truth equals truth then. You believe it's purely the fallacy of authority and who says it, and you're not asking critical questions of data. Okay? You just want to go through life trusting someone easy because, after all, that's the easy thing to do. I can't abide that anymore. If you say, I hate corporations, but I also hate alternative media, like Breitbart or like this, then I'm going to look at you and go, you were born under power lines, weren't you? There's no excuse for it anymore. Mainstream media are corporations. They are businesses. They are out there to make money. And yes, is Breitbart too? Of course it is. But at least Breitbart tells me their leanings right up front, right? Same with HuffPo or BuzzFeed. They're left wing. I know that. I know that watching them. I know that when I get their stories, so I can better critically analyze what they're saying. But if you shit on my cupcake and call it frosting and say we're the mainstream media, we're unbiased, we're here to help you out, I'm going to kick you in the jimmy and I'm not going to listen to your stuff. And that's why the mainstream media is tanking. People have seen through this. Bias, was a book published in the 90s that pointed out Dan Rather's bias. And what, we think that somehow that's gotten better over the years? No. No, it's crony capitalism, once more, only applying to news media. You grow up, wake up, start noticing this stuff. Think for yourself. Again, a religious person saying think for yourself. How weird is that to hear from somebody anymore? This is again why I like some of the skeptics, even though we disagree on theism. We disagree on religion, but at least many of them are starting to realize that elements of Western culture that grew up in Western culture, right, Marxism and third wave feminism, are Western contributions to the world. And while they started off as good movements, or at least critical movements, they have become their own thing like tumorous monsters. And they grow and they grow and they grow. And you wonder why ISIS is getting big? I'll tell you why. The West has a huge conflict of identity now. We don't know who we are. We just criticize. We put things in identity boxes in politics. We don't often ask what our identity is in relationship to true ethics and values, lasting ones. It's just ideology. And people from here, the United States, both immigrant and not, who feel left out by this view, are easy pickings for ISIS. Okay? And if you want to know true political leanings, notice that Twitter can silence conservative and right-wing people, and yet ISIS recruiters are still on there. You still think that, corporations are good for you? Nope. If you're left-wing, wake up.